The hurdy-gurdy is a stringed instrument that produces sound by a crank-turned, rosined wheel rubbing against the strings. The wheel functions much like a violin bow, and single notes played on the instrument sound similar to those of a violin. Melodies are played on a keyboard that presses tangents, small wedges, typically made of wood, against one or more of the strings to change the pitch. Like most other acoustic stringed instruments, it has a soundboard to make the vibration of the strings audible. Most hurdy-gurdies have multiple droned strings, which give a constant pitch accompaniment to the melody, resulting in a sound similar to that of bagpipes. For this reason, the hurdy-gurdy is often used interchangeably or along with bagpipes, particularly in Occitan, Catalan, Sardinian, Cajun, French and contemporary Galician and Hungarian folk music. Many folk music festivals in Europe feature music groups with hurdy-gurdy players. The most famous has been held since 1976 at Saint-Chartier in the Indre-Département in central France. In 2009, it relocated nearby to the Château d'Ars at Le Château, where it continues to take place during the week nearest July 14th. Origins and history. The hurdy-gurdy is generally thought to have originated from fiddles in either Europe or the Middle East sometime before the 11th century A.D. The first recorded reference to fiddles in Europe was in the 9th century by the Persian geographer Ibn Khaldun, describing the lyra as a typical instrument within the Byzantine Empire. One of the earliest forms of the hurdy-gurdy was the Organist Rim, a large instrument with a guitar-shaped body and a long neck in which the keys were set. The Organist Rim had a single melody string and two droned strings, which ran over a common bridge, and a relatively small wheel. Due to its size, the Organist Rim was played by two people, one of whom turned the crank while the other pulled the keys upward. Pulling keys upward is cumbersome, so only slow tunes could be played on the Organist Rim. The pitches on the Organist Rim were set according to Pythagorean temperament, and the instrument was primarily used in monastic and church settings. To accompany choral music, Abbot Odo of Cluny is supposed to have written a short description of the construction of the Organist Rim entitled Quomodo Organistrum Construita, known through a much later copy, but its authenticity is very doubtful. Another 10th century treatise thought to have mentioned an instrument like a hurdy-gurdy is an Arabic musical compendium written by al-Ziraqli. One of the earliest visual depictions of the Organist Rim is from the 12th century Portico da Gloria on the cathedral at Santiago de Compostela, Galicia, Spain. It has a carving of two musicians playing an Organist Rim. Later on, the Organist Rim was made smaller to let a single player both turn the crank and work the keys. The solo Organist Rim was known from Spain and France, but was largely replaced by the Symphonia, a small box-shaped version of the hurdy-gurdy with three strings and a diatonic keyboard. At about the same time, a new form of key pressed from beneath was developed. These keys were much more practical for faster music and easier to handle. Eventually they completely replaced keys pulled up from above. Medieval depictions of the Symphonia show both types of keys. During the Renaissance, the hurdy-gurdy was a very popular instrument, and the characteristic form had a short neck and a boxy body with a curved tail end. It was around this time that buzzing bridges first appeared in illustrations. The buzzing bridge is an asymmetrical bridge that rests under a droned string on the soundboard. When the wheel is accelerated, one foot of the bridge lifts from the soundboard and vibrates, creating a buzzing sound. The buzzing bridge is thought to have been borrowed from the trombone marina, a bowed-string instrument. During the late Renaissance, two characteristic shapes of hurdy-gurdies developed. The first was guitar-shaped and the second had a rounded lute-type body made of staves. The lute-like body is especially characteristic of French instruments. By the end of the 17th century, century, changing musical tastes demanded greater polyphonic capabilities than the hurdy-gurdy could offer and pushed the instrument to the lowest social classes. As a result, it acquired names like the German Bauernlyre, peasants' lyre, and Bettlerlyre, beggars' lyre. During the 18th century, however, French Rococo tastes for rustic diversions brought the hurdy-gurdy back to the attention of the upper classes, where it acquired tremendous popularity among the nobility, with famous composers writing works for the hurdy-gurdy. The most famous of these is Nicolas Chedeville's Il Pasto Fido, attributed to Vivaldi. At this time, the most common style of hurdy-gurdy developed, the six-string violin. This instrument has 2 melody strings and 4 drones. The drone strings are tuned so that by turning them on or off, the instrument can be played in multiple keys. During this time, the hurdy-gurdy also spread further to Central Europe, where further variations developed in Western Slavic countries, German-speaking areas, and Hungary. Most types of hurdy-gurdy were essentially extinct by the early 20th century, but a few have survived. The best known of the French violin, the Hungarian tekerlant, and the Spanish zanfona. In Ukraine, a variety called the lira was widely used by blind street musicians, most of whom were purged by Stalin in the 1930s. The hurdy-gurdy tradition is well developed, particularly in Hungary, Poland, Belarus and Ukraine. In Ukraine, it is known as the lira aurelia. It was and still is played by professional, often blind, itinerant musicians known as liniki. The repertoire has mostly para-religious themes. Most of it originated in the Baroque period. In eastern Ukraine, the repertoire includes unique historic epics known as dumy and folk dances. Liniki were categorized as beggars by the Russian authorities and fell under harsh repressive measures if they were caught performing in the streets of major cities until 1902, when the authorities were asked by ethnographers attending the 12th All-Russian Archaeological Conference to stop persecuting them. The hurdy-gurdy is the instrument played by Der Lehrmann, the street musician portrayed in the last melancholy song of Schubert's Winterreise. It is also featured and played prominently in the film Captains Courageous as the instrument of the character Manuel, acted by Spencer Tracy. The instrument came into a new public consciousness when Donovan released his hit pop song, Hurdy-Gurdy Man, in 1968. Although the song didn't use a hurdy-gurdy, the repeated reference to the instrument in the song's lyrics sparked curiosity and interest among young people, eventually resulting in an annual hurdy-gurdy music festival in the Olympic Peninsula area of the state of Washington each September. Today, the tradition has resurfaced. Revivals have been underway for many years as well in Austria, Belgium and the Netherlands, Czech Republic, Germany, Italy, Poland, Portugal, Russia, Spain and Sweden. As the instrument has been revived, musicians have used it in a variety of styles of music, including contemporary forms not typically associated with it. Other instruments called hurdy-gurdies. In the 18th century, the term hurdy-gurdy was also applied to a small, portable, barrel organ that was frequently played by poor buskers. Barrel organs require only the turning of the crank to play. The music is coded by pinned barrels, perforated paper rolls, and more recently by electronic modules. The French call the barrel organ the orgue de barbarie, and the Germans Drehorgel, instead of Drehler. Terminology. A person who plays the hurdy-gurdy is called a hurdy-gurdyist, or violist. In France, a player is called un sonneur de vielle. Because of the prominence of the French tradition, many instrument and performance terms used in English are commonly taken from the French, and players generally need to know these terms to read relevant literature. Such common terms include the following: trumpet, the highest pitched drone string that features the buzzing bridge; mouche, the drone string pitched a fourth or fifth below the trumpet; petit bourdon, the drone string pitched an octave below the trumpet; gros bourdon, the drone string pitched an octave below the mouche; chanterelle, melody string, also called chanters or chanter strings in English; chen, the buzzing bridge; tarrant, a small peg set in the instrument's tailpiece that is used to control the sensitivity of the buzzing bridge. Names of the instrument according to the Oxford English Dictionary. The mid-18th century origin of the term hurdy-gurdy is onomatopoeic in origin, after the repetitive warble in pitch that characterizes instruments with solid wooden wheels that have warp due to changes in humidity or after the sound of the buzzing bridge. Alternately, the term is thought to come from the Scottish and Northern English term for uproar or disorder, hurdy-gurdy, or from hurly-burly, an Old English term for noise or commotion. The instrument is sometimes more descriptively called a wheel fiddle in English, but this term is rarely used among players of the instrument. Another possible derivation is from the Hungarian hagedis, meaning a fiddle. In France, the instrument is known as vielle or roue or simply vielle, while in the French-speaking regions of Belgium it is also known in local dialects as viellerite, vielita tisa djva. The Flemings and the Dutch call it a drylia, which is similar to its German name, Grayla. An alternate German name, Bauernlyre, means peasant's lyre. In Italy, it is called the Gironda o Lira Tedesca, while in Spain, it is a sanfona, except in the Catalan region, where it is known as a viola da roda. In the Basque language, it is known as a branca. In Portugal, it is called sanfona. The Hungarian name tekerlant and the alternate forgoland both mean turning lute. Another Hungarian name for the instrument is narnia, which is thought to be an onomatopoeic reference to the repetitive warble produced by a wheel that is not even. This term was considered derogatory in the Hungarian lowlands, but was the normal term for the instrument on Csepel Island directly south of Budapest. The equivalent names Nynra and Nymra are used in Slovakia and the Czech Republic respectively. In Russian and Ukrainian the instrument is called wheel lyre. In Poland it is called cranked lyre. Lapland and related terms today are generally used to refer to members of the lute or lyre family, but historically had a broader range of meaning and were used for many types of stringed instruments. Design, shape. In her overview of the instrument's history, Palmer recorded 23 different forms of the hurdy-gurdy, and there is still no standardized design for the hurdy-gurdy today. The six-stringed French vielle or roue is the best known and most common sort. A number of regional forms developed, but outside France the instrument was considered a folk instrument and there were no schools of construction that could have determined a standard form. There are two primary body styles for contemporary instruments, guitar-bodied and lute-backed. Both forms are found in French-speaking areas, while guitar-bodied instruments are the general form elsewhere. The box form of the symphonia is also commonly found among players of early music and historical reenactors. Strings. Historically, strings were made of gut, which is still a preferred material today, and modern instruments are mounted with violin and cello strings. However, metal strings have become common in the 20th century, especially for the heavier drone strings or for low melody strings if octave tuning is used. Nylon is also sometimes used, but is disliked by many players. Some instruments also have optional sympathetic strings, generally guitar or banjo B strings. The drone strings produce steady sounds at fixed pitches. The melody string, Hungarian dalamher, are stopped with tangents attached to keys that change the vibration length of the string, much as a guitarist uses his or her fingers on the fretboard of a guitar. guitar. In the earliest hurdy-gurdies, these keys were arranged to provide a Pythagorean temperament, but in later instruments the tunings have varied widely, with equal temperament most common because it allows easier blending with other instruments. However, because the tangents can be adjusted to tune individual notes, it is possible to tune hurdy-gurdies to almost any temperament as needed. Most contemporary hurdy-gurdies have 24 keys that cover a range of 2 chromatic octaves. To achieve proper intonation and sound quality, each string of a hurdy-gurdy must be wrapped with cotton or similar fibers. The cotton on melody strings tends to be quite light, while drone strings have heavier cotton. Improper cottoning results in a raspy tone, especially at higher pitches. In addition, individual strings often have to have the height above the wheel surface adjusted by having small pieces of paper placed between the strings and the bridge, a process called shimming. Shimming and cottoning are connected processes since either one can affect their geometry of the instrument's strings. Buzzing bridge in some types of hurdy-gurdy, notably the French violin and the Hungarian tekerelent, makers have added a buzzing bridge, called a chana on one drone string. Modern makers have increased the number of buzzing bridges on French-style instruments to as many as 4. This mechanism consists of a loose bridge under a drone string. The tail of the buzzing bridge is inserted into a narrow vertical slot that holds the buzzing bridge in place. The free end of the dog rests on the soundboard of the hurdy-gurdy and is more or less free to vibrate. When the wheel is turned slowly, the pressure on the string holds the bridge in place, sounding a drone. When the crank is accelerated, the hammer lifts up and vibrates against the soundboard, producing a characteristic rhythmic buzz that is used as an articulation or to provide percussive effect, especially in dance pieces. On French-style instruments, the sensitivity of the buzzing bridge can be altered by turning a peg called a tyrant in the tailpiece of the instrument that is connected by a wire or thread to the trumpet. The tyrant adjusts the lateral pressure on the trumpet and thereby sets the sensitivity of the buzzing bridge to changes in wheel velocity. There are various stylistic techniques that are used as the player turns the crank, briefly accelerating the wheel at various points in its revolution. This technique is often known by its French term, the coup de poignet, with the acceleration being applied by striking the handle with the thumb fingers or base of the thumb at one or more of 4 points in the revolution of the wheel to achieve the desired rhythm. A long buzz can also be achieved by pulling the handle rapidly through the rotation, known as the coup gras. On the Hungarian tekero, the same control is achieved by using a wedge called the rosined that pushes the drone string downward. In traditional tekero playing, the buzzing bridge is controlled entirely by the wrist of the player and has a very different sound and rhythmic possibilities from those available on French instruments. Comparison of French and Hungarian buzzing bridges. Regional types. Regional types of hurdy-gurdies since the Renaissance can also be classified based on wheel size and the presence or absence of a buzzing bridge. The following description of various types uses this framework. Small wheel. Small-wheeled instruments are traditionally found in Central and Eastern Europe. They feature a broad key box and the drone strings run within the key box. Because of the small size of the wheel, these instruments most commonly have 3 strings, 1 melody string, 1 tenor drone and 1 bass drone. They sometimes have up to 5 strings. String-adjusted buzzing bridge, German pear-shaped Drehler, 2 to 3 drone strings and 1 or 2 chromatic melody strings. Characteristic V-shaped peg box, often extensively decorated. The type of buzzing bridge found on this instrument usually has the adjustment peg set in a block next to the string, rather than in the tailpiece. Wedge-adjusted buzzing bridge tekerelent. usually 2 drones plus 1 or 2 chromatic melody strings. The broad key box is often carved or decorated extensively. Tyrolean Drehler, very similar to the Techereland, but usually has a diatonic keyboard, may be the historical source for the Techero. No buzzing bridge. Lyra Corboa, guitar-shaped, 2 drones plus 1 diatonic melody string. Lyra, guitar-shaped, 2 drones plus 1 diatonic melody string. Evenly spaced keyboard. Lyra, guitar-shaped, 2 drones plus 1 diatonic melody string. 2 body types, carved from a single piece of wooden guitar shaped with transverse pegs and multi-piece construction with vertical pegs. Evenly spaced keyboard. Nymra Kolovratek, guitar shaped, 2 drones plus 1 diatonic melody string. Broad key box, superficially similar to the Techero, but lacks the buzzing bridge. Lyra Vevlyra, revived in the 20th century based on historical examples. 2 body forms, an elongated boxy shape and a long pear shape, usually diatonic, but has been extended with a chromatic range with the additional keys placed below the normal diatonic range. German tulip-shaped Drehler, 3 drones plus 1 diatonic melody string. Large wheel. Large-wheeled instruments are traditionally found in Western Europe. These instruments generally have a narrow key box with drone strings that run outside the key box. They also generally have more strings, and doubling or tripling of the melody string is common. Some modern instruments have as many as 15 strings played by the wheel, although the most common number is 6. String-adjusted buzzing bridge. Viola roue, usually 4 drones plus 2 melody strings, but often extended to have more strings. 2 body forms, guitar-bodied and lute-backed. French instruments generally have a narrow key box with drone strings that run on the outside of the key box. Traditional French instruments have 2 melody strings and 4 drone strings with 1 buzzing bridge. Contemporary instruments often have more. The instrument of well-known player Gilles Chabinat has 4 melody strings fixed to a viola tailpiece, and 4 drone strings on a cello tailpiece. This instrument also has 3 trumpet strings. Nymra, guitar-shaped, 2 forms. One has a standard drone melody arrangement, while the other runs the drone strings between the melody strings in the key box. Both diatonic and chromatic forms are found. Other mechanisms for adjusting the amount of buzz on the trumpet string. No buzzing bridge. Zanfona, typically guitar-shaped body, with 3 melody strings, and 2 drone strings. Some older examples had a diatonic keyboard, and most modern models have a chromatic keyboard. Zanfonas are usually tuned to the key of C major, with the melody strings tuned in unison to G above the middle C on the piano. The drones are the bordoncino in G and the bordon in C. Sometimes 2 of the melody strings are in unison, and the remaining string is tuned an octave lower in unison with the bordoncino. Nymra, guitar-shaped, 2 forms. One has a standard drone melody arrangement, while the other runs the drone strings between the melody strings in the key box. Both diatonic and chromatic forms are found. List of musicians using the hurdy-gurdy. Requiem Couves, Valentin Clastrayer, Emmanuel Parinin, Dominique Riegeff, Jean-François Duterte, Anna Murphy.